My wife and daughters use the money I send from abroad to live as a family with their lover, but now they are shocked that I am using my college funds to get a divorce. I, 45, have spent the last 5 years working abroad so I can provide a good life for my wife, Irina, 43, and our 2 daughters, Katie, 18, and Sandy, 16. Growing up, my relationship with my father was not good. He was the kind of man who sat around the house all day doing nothing. He never had a steady job, never helped out, and didn't show much interest in us. My mother, on the other hand, did everything. She worked long hours, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs at a time, just to keep food on the table. She paid the bills, cooked, cleaned, and raised my siblings and me on her own. I loved her very much, but it hurt to see her always so tired. She gave everything she had while my father sat there acting like it wasn't his problem. Seeing that as a child made me decide to be different. I didn't want my future children to go through what I went through, watching one parent carry all the weight while the other gave up. I started from scratch. I worked any job I could find and saved every penny. I got up little by little, step by step. I wanted a life where my children didn't have to worry about money, food, or whether the lights would go out. That's why I accepted the job abroad. Also because job opportunities in my field were drying up, and the vast majority of work was done abroad. It was hard being away, but I wanted Katie and Sandy to have the best life possible, and not have to go through what I did. I swore I'd provide for them, and be the kind of father my own dad never was. I could have stayed here, working another job, but it probably wouldn't have been enough to send them to college, or give them the life they'd had up until this point. At the beginning of our marriage, I had a decent job locally, but that job dried up when they closed the local company and moved everything overseas. Katie and Sandy were young, so they offered me a job abroad to relocate, and I had to accept it because I knew I wouldn't get anything here given the state of the industry. The downside was that I'd have to be away for long periods, sometimes up to a year, but the price was worth it. He could afford private schools, save for his future, and buy a nice house. It was a sacrifice, but Irina supported the decision. He agreed that it was the best thing for us. At first, it seemed to work. I came back every few months, stayed for a few months, and we made the most of our time together. That was the arrangement we made with the company to make this possible. But as the years went by, I began to notice a change. The girls grew older and became more distant, and when I visited them, Irina stopped putting in the effort. I assumed it was just a phase, teenagers being teenagers and Irina feeling overwhelmed handling everything alone. I thought that was the price I paid for prioritizing work over being physically present, but it would be worth it when Katie and Sandy had the futures they wanted. Turns out I was a fool, a naive and trusting fool. Last year, everything went down the drain. A friend of mine back home got in touch, saying he'd seen something that didn't seem right. Then, they sent me photos of Irina with another man, Jeffrey, 48. These weren't casual photos. They were full-blown family moments. Irina and Jeffrey smiling on vacation at the beach, Jeffrey at amusement parks with my daughters, and Jeffrey sitting at the head of my table. I felt sick. These were trips I'd paid for with the money I'd worked for. And here was Jeffrey, a man with no job and no money, playing father to my family. When I investigated further, the truth came out. Irina had been in a relationship with Jeffrey for years. He'd been there while I worked day and night abroad to give them the life they enjoyed. I had to work quite a bit to have time off to return. Katie and Sandy knew about him. They didn't just know, they accepted it. Jeffrey became their fun stepdad while I was away. On the trips my daughters took, they were right there, enjoying the vacations I paid for, with Jeffrey, while I sat in a small apartment halfway around the world, missing birthdays and holidays. It tore me apart. I wasn't even angry at first, I was just numb. I kept wondering how they could do this to me, how Irina could betray me so completely. How Katie and Sandy, my daughters, could treat this man like he was their father. I'd missed out on so many things trying to give them everything, and in the end, it was nothing more than a paycheck to them. When I confronted them, their reactions were like daggers to the heart. Katie didn't even flinch. She said I was never there, that she was waiting. Sandy was quieter, but she didn't defend me either. I was just an absence in their eyes, and that apparently justified everything. According to them, I chose work over family, so this was my fault. Irina chimed in to say that Jeffrey had been there for them emotionally, and that I needed to accept reality. The reality is that I spent years busting my ass for a family that replaced me in short order, a family that saw me only as a bank account. And Jeffrey, the guy they let sit in my chair at my table, has contributed nothing but smiles and empty words. The worst part came. When I checked Katie and Sandy's college funds, I realized Irina had been skimming money off of him. Thousands of dollars were gone. It wasn't all the money, but it was enough to cause a major blow. I felt sick. Then I realized the trips, the vacations, the fun outings with Jeffrey. That's where the money went. Irina used the funds I spent years saving to take Jeffrey on vacations, shopping trips, and dinners. I saw photos of them smiling on beaches, eating at fancy restaurants, and having a good time while I was halfway around the world working. Those happy family moments they shared were paid for with my money. Jeffrey didn't pay any of it. He couldn't. The man doesn't have a steady job or a cent to his name, but he was happy to enjoy the life I worked for. My daughters, Irina and Jeffrey, were out there having fun while I missed birthdays and parties to give them everything. And instead of saving for Katie and Sandy's future, Irina spent her college money playing happy family with the man who contributed nothing. It was the worst part of the whole betrayal. I immediately contacted a lawyer and informed Irina that I was filing for divorce. And what about the remaining college funds? I'm using every penny to pay legal fees. I'm not going to let Irina and Jeffrey get away with their little affair while I pay the bills. My daughters are furious, especially Katie. She says I'm ruining their lives by denying them the chance to go to college. Sandy said I was being silly and unfair because Jeffrey doesn't have enough money to help them. But why should I care? They didn't care when they were laughing on the beaches with him. They didn't care when I missed Christmas or birthdays because I was working for them. They didn't care when Irina took Jeffrey to restaurants with my money. Now, suddenly, they care because their futures are in jeopardy. The way I see it, they made their choices. They chose to accept Jeffrey, they chose to lie to me, they chose to take advantage of my sacrifices, and now they're facing the consequences. If they want to get angry, they can get angry at Jeffrey for not being able to provide for them. They can get angry at Irina for stealing their future. I worked for that money and sacrificed a lot. I even think that if I had stayed home flipping burgers for minimum wage, they would hate me too, because they would have had to change their lifestyles, and now they wouldn't have a fund either. I'm not going to pay for his betrayal. Let Jeffrey step up now, if he's such a good guy. Let him figure out how to pay for Katie's college. Irina and Jeffrey should explain to Sandy why there's no money left for her future. This isn't my job anymore. Edit. Many people asked me if I was thinking of returning to my country to live there again, and that was the plan. Once my daughters had enough money to study, I would come back and look for something else, since they would be moving out and the household expenses would be less. We also planned to move to a smaller place and not need so much money. That was the plan. I wasn't going to sacrifice my whole life. It was just a few years. But apparently, I was the only one with that plan, and it's time to make a new one. For those who asked why I didn't check the fund, it's because I don't do it often. I didn't think I should be worried about my wife using that money to go on vacation with her lover. I just made deposits regularly and occasionally checked the balance. But these expenses are recent, as are the vacations. Before then, I probably used the remaining money I sent for monthly expenses. As for the photos, they're from Jeffrey's profile, who didn't tag my wife or daughters, but someone ended up discovering them anyway. Update 1. I recently filed for divorce. I've been back in the city for 2 weeks now, and I'm trying my best to deal with everything. I've rented a small apartment because I don't want to go back to that house anymore. It's been a lot to take in since then. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. Katie and Sandy have been constantly inundating me with messages. It's always the same. You're ruining our lives. How could you do this? Or you're being unfair. I've told them I haven't ruined anything, that the money in their fund has been spent on vacations, so they should be writing to the real culprit. I don't feel bad for them. They're not little girls. They accepted my wife cheating on me, and they were aware of that. I can't ignore the fact that for years they kept me in the dark. While I was working abroad, they were spending that time with the man my wife was having an affair with. They weren't just spending time with him, they were vacationing with him, going out to eat, playing happy family, all while I was thousands of miles away, working so they wouldn't have to work multiple jobs, like I did, to pay for college because my parents couldn't afford mine. I thought they'd appreciate my sacrifice, but they didn't. And even when I confronted them, they couldn't see their mistake. They made me feel like the villain. They said I was absent, that I wasn't there for them. And I don't deny that those things are true, about being physically far away, because I called or texted them all the time. But it was a sacrifice I made, and it was hard for me too. Added to that, I worked so hard there that I could take months off to return. All I did these years was work very hard and return to be there for my family, or who I thought was my family. I wasn't perfect, but I made an effort to make distance not a problem. Or at least, not a big problem. Despite all that, They still thought Jeffrey was more of a father than me, a man with no job, no money, and nothing to offer, who was taking advantage of his father. He didn't even take them out with his own money. A man who has done nothing but take advantage of me and my family. And I know I wasn't there for them emotionally either. Even from a distance, they themselves have confessed that I wasn't a father figure, but they tolerated it because it made their mother happy that I wasn't there. I don't expect them to adore me just because I provided for them, but I feel they owed me the truth. No one deserves to be cheated on, especially in my position. Instead, they kept me in the dark for years, pretending everything was okay, while living a lie with their mother and Jeffrey. How can I forgive that? How can I forget everything I've learned and act like it never happened? I don't think I can. Irina, on the other hand, has been completely shameless throughout this. When I filed for divorce, I thought she might have a moment of guilt or regret, but I was wrong. Her lawyer, who, incidentally, is her 38-year-old sister Erica, sent me a legal notice detailing the terms of Irina's divorce. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The terms are ridiculous. He planned to take everything I have after betraying me the way he did. What makes this all even more absurd is that we signed a prenuptial agreement before we got married, and that agreement is solid. I made sure of that. At the time, I thought I was just being cautious. I didn't think I'd ever have to use it, but now I'm glad I did. My lawyer reviewed everything and assured me I didn't have to worry about it. He told me not to say anything to Irina or Erica for now, and to wait. He'll take care of it. The prenup makes it clear that Irina has no rights to anything of mine, and my lawyer says her legal notice is worthless. Still, it's infuriating for the sheer audacity of it. I spent years working to build a life for my family, our family, and Irina spent those same years destroying it all behind my back. And Jeffrey? He's a good-for-nothing who doesn't know the value of effort. Irina has been like his mother, who has spoiled him all this time. I don't know what Irina sees in him, but I guess that doesn't matter anymore. I don't think they realize how much it hurts me to see them take their mother's side in all of this. Maybe that makes me a bad father, but I can't pretend this didn't happen. For now, I'm just focusing on getting over the divorce, probably return to the country permanently, and look for another type of job. When this is all over, I'll just have to provide for myself. I could stay in the other country, but with family here, it's best to return. Also, I see that job differently now. It reminds me of everything that happened. Update 2: I recently received some disturbing information from a friend of mine, the same person who first informed me about Irina's affair. She called to inform me that Jeffrey, the man my wife was cheating on me with, had moved into our house. When I heard this, I couldn't believe it. Their audacity made me laugh. Not only did he have an affair with my wife, but he's now living in the house I worked so hard to build for my family. Irina, of course, thought she was going to keep the house. She was already acting like it was hers. She truly believed she had the right to stay there. What she didn't seem to remember was that when we bought the house, there was a problem that prevented us from putting it in her name as well. The house is still in my name, and she had either completely forgotten about that or thought I'd give it to her in the divorce. So I decided to call her and break the news, telling her she had to move out of the house before the weekend. When I told Irina this, she laughed at me. She told me the house belonged to her too, and that I couldn't ask her to. I had to remind him of the problem we had when we bought the house, and that it was still in my name. There was a pause, and I could tell he remembered what had happened. His tone changed, but he didn't back down. She tried to argue with me, saying she had nowhere else to go. Then she tried to make me feel guilty, talking about how we'd been together for 20 years, and that should mean something. I told her it didn't mean anything to betray me, so those 20 years are worth less to her. I told her she could stay with him or go somewhere else. It wasn't my problem anymore. She started crying, hoping I'd feel bad for her, but I didn't. As soon as I heard her crying, I hung up. After that, I received a message from Sandy. She was furious and said some of the worst things imaginable. She accused me of not only taking away her future, but of now leaving her homeless. I told them that at this point, neither of them was my problem. It's not like they were kids being manipulated by their mothers. One is 18 and about to go off to college, and the other is 16. They've both asked me to meet because they want to clear some things up and explain to me what really happened. Part of me knows that won't change anything, but I want to know more about what's happened, and I have nothing to lose by meeting up. It's not like doing so will make me soft and allow them to stay in the house or pay for their college. I'm not sure what will happen when we meet up, but I'm trying to stay calm. I think I at least deserve to know what's been going on from the people involved, since Irina won't tell me anything, instead of hearing everything from a third party. I'll probably come back to tell you everything I know after the meeting. It might not be much, but it's better than nothing. Update 3. I met with Katie and Sandy to talk, and it was so much more than I expected. But when we sat down together, I learned so many things I wasn't prepared to hear. The first thing that came out really surprised me. Irina had been telling them that they were basically my backup family. She told them I had another family back home, and that I was keeping them close in case I ever needed them. I don't know if that's true or just a story my daughters told me, but I don't know why I would need them if what Irina said was true, maybe for a transplant or something. Whether or not Irina's words are true, I find it impossible that they would have believed it. I'd always been there for them, no matter how difficult things were. I did everything I could to make them feel loved and cared for, even from a distance. As I said before, I've traveled and stayed here for quite a while, and I've called and texted every day. If I had a second family and didn't care, I wouldn't have gone to the trouble of doing it. Again, the arrangement wasn't perfect, but I tried to make it better. Then I started wondering why she would say something like that. And I thought it was likely Irina would say something like that. She was trying to justify her actions, her affair, everything she'd done to betray the family. Everything was easier for her to accept if she could convince herself that I didn't care about them. When I questioned them further about what Irina had told them, they seemed at a loss. They told me they had no idea Irina was using their college funds. When I mentioned it before, they assumed I was just trying to shift the blame. But when I showed them the bank statements and the evidence I had, their faces fell. They were upset. They had no idea that Irina had been taking the money intended for their future and using it for her own purposes. At this point, I still think they're angry that she used their money. I told them I wasn't going to reset their college funds, that the money was gone, and that I would probably need it when I finally left my job and returned to live here. But when I told them that, they explained the purpose of the meeting. They said I was just like my father, and that they were just as much victims as I was in Irina's plan, that they shouldn't be blamed for being caught in the middle of this, and that they're just children between two adults. I asked them why they never mentioned this to me before, and they told me that Irina had told them that if they ever found out about this whole thing, I would hurt her. And how would I do that? Telepathically, by throwing money in her face. Then came the part where I realized how selfish they were, and that to save themselves, they were willing to throw anyone under the bus. First it was me, now it was her mother. They told me they wanted to stay in the house, and that Irina would have to leave, to gain sympathy for me. But I told them the house would probably be sold once I had my lawyer's approval. They were angry that, as a father, I was abandoning my daughters. Which made me laugh a lot, because I'm their father when they need money, but when their mother cheated on me, it was nothing. Edit. Many people think I'm right not to forgive my daughters so easily, but there's a group who thinks they're just little girls. I'd agree if they were 6, but that's not the case here. I don't understand. After everything they've done, I should just give them the money. If they did, they'd be calling me a coon. No matter what I do, people are going to see me as the bad guy. If I had stayed here, working in a job that couldn't send my daughters to college, I'd also be the bad guy in their eyes. If I look for a well-paying job in my field, I'm also the bad guy. I wish life were so easy, where I was paid millions and only worked 2 hours a day. But in some people's eyes, I'd probably also be the bad guy for spending so much time with them. Update 4. The divorce was finalized about a month ago, and things are finally starting to calm down. Irina has moved out of my house, and while I'm glad it's all over, it still feels strange. I don't really know what's going on with her now. I haven't spoken to her, and to be honest, I'm not sure I want to know. It wasn't a peaceful parting, but it was over. All the demands I'd made during the divorce were rejected, all thanks to the prenuptial agreement we signed before we got married. I wasn't about to let him take anything that wasn't his. I worked so hard for everything, and I made sure the prenup protected the sacrifice I made in vain. Both Sandy and Katie will be there, living with their aunt. Since Sandy is still a minor, I owe child support until she turns 18. That's what the law says, and it will only be for a short time. I ordered a paternity test, just to be cautious, and both turned out to be my daughters. Katie won't be attending college because her mother can't afford it, and I still maintain I won't pay for her. For my part, I've already quit my job and am looking for something else. It will pay less, but I no longer have a large family to support. Just alimony, and that's it. I can move closer to my mother. I've also been helping her financially over the years, but unlike Irina, she hasn't been ungrateful for everything I've done. I don't know if this will be my last update, or if there are still more to come, but I'll thank you all here for your support anyway. I know not everyone agrees with what I did, but that's the way it is. I can't ignore the fact that my daughters were also part of the betrayal. And if you like supporting people who were part of the infidelity, good for you. I'm not saying this out of anger, I just know that something like this, sooner or later, will end very badly. My daughters never respected me. And I'm not saying I can't be partly to blame for that. I've never tried to paint myself as a perfect father, but I can't buy respect with money either, that's become clear. I tried to balance everything, and it didn't work. Giving them money now won't make much difference, in my opinion. Update 5. I think these things warrant an update, even if it's brief. My ex-wife is no longer with Jeffrey. Shortly after my update, I learned that she had rented something with him. But my ex-wife barely had a low-paying job. So when Jeffrey saw he couldn't get any more oil out of that well, he said goodbye. I know my daughters have been pressuring her to help them pay for college or co-sign a loan, but my ex-wife isn't in a position to do any of that. Neither am I, now that I've moved and bought something close to my mother to start over.